Two brothers, born into the most famous family in the world, walking side by side behind their mother's coffin as millions watched. The image of 12-year-old Prince William and 10-year-old Prince Harry at Princess Diana's funeral became one of the most heartbreaking scenes in modern royal history. Their heads bowed, their small hands clasped behind their backs, they seemed to lean on each other for strength in their darkest hour. For years after that tragic day in 1997, William and Harry appeared inseparable. They shared the unique burden of growing up under constant public scrutiny while grieving their beloved mother. They supported each other through the awkward teenage years, military service, and the early challenges of royal duty. The world watched them grow from vulnerable boys into confident young men who seemed to genuinely enjoy each other's company. But somewhere along the way, something changed. The brotherhood that had sustained them through their mother's death began to crack. What started as small disagreements grew into fundamental differences about duty, family, and the very nature of royal life itself. 20 key decisions, made over more than 2 decades, would slowly but permanently drive a wedge between the once inseparable princes. This is the story of how two brothers who promised to always protect each other ended up on opposite sides of an ocean, barely speaking, with their relationship seemingly beyond repair. It's a tale that reveals how even the strongest bonds can be broken when personal desires clash with institutional expectations, when love becomes complicated by loyalty, and when the weight of being royal proves too much for one brother to bear. The decisions that tore them apart weren't made in a single moment of anger. Instead, they accumulated like small stones in a shoe, each one adding discomfort until walking together became impossible. From childhood choices about privacy and protection to adult decisions about marriage, duty, and independence, every major turning point in their lives seemed to push them further apart. What makes their story so compelling is that it could happen to any family. Strip away the titles, the palaces, and the protocol, and you're left with a universal tale of siblings who grew up to want different things from life. The difference is that for William and Harry, their personal choices became front-page news, their family disagreements played out in front of the world, and their inability to reconcile affects not just them, but an entire institution that has survived for over 1,000 years. The tragedy isn't just that they're no longer close, it's that they both genuinely tried to honor their mother's memory and protect what she held dear, but they came to completely different conclusions about how to do that. One chose to embrace his destiny as future king, while the other chose to escape it entirely. Both decisions came with enormous costs that they're still paying today. The seeds of division between Prince William and Prince Harry were planted long before either brother understood what they would grow into. In the aftermath of their mother's death, when the world saw only 2 grieving boys supporting each other, several crucial decisions were being made that would shape their relationship for decades to come. The first significant choice came within weeks of Princess Diana's funeral. Prince Charles, devastated by his own grief and the enormous responsibility of raising 2 sons alone, had to decide how to structure their upbringing. The decision he made seemed logical at the time. William, as the heir to the throne, would receive additional private tutoring about constitutional matters and royal history. Harry, as the spare, would follow a more traditional educational path. This choice, while well-intentioned, created the first invisible line between the brothers. William began spending hours each week with private tutors, who taught him about parliamentary procedure, the Commonwealth, and his future role as king. These sessions, held in the quiet corners of Highgrove House or St. James's Palace, were kept strictly confidential. Harry, meanwhile, focused on his regular schoolwork and sports. The brothers still spent most of their time together, but William began carrying knowledge that he couldn't share, secrets that slowly separated his experience from his younger brothers. The second decision came during their time at Eton College. Both boys had been sent to the prestigious school, following in their father's footsteps. But their experiences there would prove vastly different. William, already showing signs of the serious, duty-bound personality that would define his adult life, threw himself into his studies and began forming relationships with classmates who understood the weight of inherited responsibility. Harry, more naturally rebellious and charismatic, gravitated toward friends who valued fun over formality. The choice that would prove most significant during these years was made not by the princes themselves, but by the palace's media strategy team. In an effort to protect the boys' privacy during their school years, a deal was struck with the British press. In exchange for leaving the princes alone during term time, the media would be given carefully orchestrated access during school holidays. This arrangement worked well for William, who was naturally more comfortable with formal, structured interactions with the press. But it created problems for Harry, whose spontaneous personality often clashed with the rigid expectations of royal public appearances. The third crucial decision happened when the brothers were still teenagers but had lasting consequences for their adult relationship. Prince Charles, encouraged by his advisors and wanting to prepare William for his future role, began including his eldest son in private meetings with government officials and senior royals. These sessions, held during school holidays, gave William early exposure to the serious business of monarchy. Harry wasn't included in these meetings, as there seemed no need for the spare to understand the intricate details of constitutional monarchy. This exclusion wasn't meant to hurt Harry, but it created a dynamic that would persist throughout their lives. William began to see himself as someone with serious responsibilities and weighty duties. Harry began to see himself as someone whose primary role was to support his brother and entertain the public. The difference in how they were treated by the institution taught them to see themselves in fundamentally different ways. A fourth decision that would shape their relationship came during their gap years before university. Both brothers wanted to travel and do charity work, but the approaches they were encouraged to take differed significantly. William was steered towards serious, meaningful volunteer work that would prepare him for his future role as head of various charitable organizations. He spent time in Chile working with Raleigh International, building houses and teaching children. The experience was structured, supervised, and designed to show him as a responsible future king. Harry, meanwhile, was encouraged to pursue activities that would showcase his more approachable, fun-loving personality. He went to Australia to work on a cattle station and to Africa to work with orphaned children in Lesotho. While his experiences were meaningful and genuine, they were framed differently by the media and the palace. William was being prepared for leadership. Harry was being positioned as the charming younger brother who would make the monarchy more relatable. The fifth significant choice was made when both brothers decided to pursue military careers. This decision, more than any other during their young adult years, seemed to bring them closer together. They both attended the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, and both threw themselves into military life with genuine enthusiasm. For a brief period, it seemed like they had found common ground that had nothing to do with royal protocol or public expectation. But even here, subtle differences in how they were treated began to emerge. William's military career was carefully managed to ensure he gained experience without exposing him to excessive risk. His role as a search and rescue helicopter pilot was important and meaningful, but it was also relatively safe. Harry, meanwhile, pushed hard to serve on the front lines in Afghanistan. He wanted to be treated exactly like any other soldier, regardless of the security risks. The palace's response to these different approaches revealed a troubling pattern. William's cautious, measured approach was praised as mature and responsible. Harry's desire to serve in combat zones was initially resisted, then grudgingly accepted, but always with the undertone that he was being reckless or attention-seeking. The message was clear. William's choices were wise, Harry's were problematic. The sixth decision that drove a wedge between them came during Harry's second deployment to Afghanistan. This tour, where he served as an Apache helicopter gunner, was kept secret from the media for months. When news of his deployment finally broke, it ended his tour early for security reasons. Harry was devastated, feeling that his chance to serve his country like any normal soldier had been stolen by his royal status. William, still safely flying rescue missions around the British Isles, couldn't fully understand his brother's frustration. This period marked the beginning of Harry's complicated relationship with his royal identity. He had tasted what it felt like to be valued for his skills rather than his title, and the contrast with his royal life was stark. In Afghanistan, he was Captain Wales, respected by his fellow soldiers for his competence and courage. Back home, he was Prince Harry, the party-loving spare, whose every mistake was front-page news. The seventh crucial decision was made by the brothers themselves, though they may not have realized its significance at the time. They chose to handle their military careers differently after active service. William transitioned smoothly into more royal duties, using his military experience to enhance his public profile as a serious, capable future king. Harry struggled with the transition, feeling lost without the clear purpose and masculine camaraderie that military life had provided. This difference in how they processed their post-military lives created a gap in understanding that would only widen over time. William saw his military service as one chapter in his preparation for kingship. Harry saw his military service as the time when he felt most authentic and useful, making everything else feel hollow by comparison. The eighth decision that would prove significant was made when both brothers began taking on more official royal duties. The palace, eager to show the monarchy's relevance to younger generations, began featuring both princes prominently in public engagements. But the roles they were assigned reflected the same pattern that had been established since childhood. William was given substantive, policy-focused engagements, while Harry was given more ceremonial or entertainment-focused duties. William found himself attending serious conferences about mental health, environmental protection, and homelessness. His opinions were sought on matters of policy, and he began developing expertise in areas that would serve him well as king. Harry, meanwhile, was sent to open sports facilities, attend charity galas, and represent the royal family at fun, light-hearted events. While his natural charm made him excellent at these roles, they reinforced his position as the entertaining younger brother, rather than a serious contributor to royal work. The ninth decision that created distance between them was Harry's choice to be more open about his struggles with mental health. Following his mother's example of using royal status to destigmatize difficult topics, Harry began speaking publicly about his grief, his anxiety, and his therapy. This openness was groundbreaking and helpful to millions of people dealing with similar issues, but it created tension within the royal family. The palace had always operated on the principle that personal struggles should be handled privately. William, while supportive of mental health awareness in general, was uncomfortable with his brother's level of personal disclosure. He worried that Harry was oversharing in a way that could damage the monarchy's reputation for discretion and dignity. This disagreement about how much personal information to share publicly would become a recurring source of tension. The 10th decision that drove them apart was made by the media, not the brothers themselves, but its impact was profound. As both princes entered their late 20s, the press began openly speculating about their different personalities and approaches to royal life. William was consistently portrayed as the responsible one, the future king who understood duty and protocol. Harry was portrayed as the wild one, the party prince whose mistakes were entertaining but concerning. These media narratives, while often oversimplified, began to shape public perception and, more importantly, how the brothers saw themselves and each other. William began to internalize the idea that he was the responsible one who had to compensate for his brother's mistakes. Harry began to resent being constantly compared unfavorably to his older brother, feeling that his genuine contributions were overlooked while his failures were magnified. The 11th crucial decision came when both brothers became seriously involved in romantic relationships. William's relationship with Catherine Middleton was carefully managed from the beginning. Their courtship was long, discreet, and designed to prepare her for royal life. Catherine was given time to understand what she was taking on, and the relationship was allowed to develop away from media scrutiny. Harry's romantic relationships, by contrast, were treated as entertainment for the tabloid press. His girlfriends were subjected to intense media attention from the moment their relationships became public. The palace provided minimal protection for these women, seemingly accepting that Harry's love life was fair game for public consumption. This difference in how their relationships were handled sent a clear message about the value placed on their respective personal happiness. The 12th decision that created lasting damage was made during the planning of William's wedding to Catherine in 2011. Harry, as best man, was expected to support his brother completely, and he did so publicly. But privately, the wedding planning process highlighted the different futures that lay ahead for the brothers. William was embarking on a carefully planned life that would lead to the throne. Harry was watching his brother move further into a world where he would always be peripheral. The wedding itself was magnificent, and Harry played his role perfectly. But the experience emphasized his position as supporting player in his brother's story. The global attention, the state protocols, and the constitutional significance of William's marriage made it clear that any future wedding Harry might have would be secondary in importance. The 13th significant choice was made in the months following William's wedding, when Harry threw himself into his royal duties with renewed energy. He seemed determined to prove his value to the institution by working harder than ever. He took on difficult tours, controversial causes, and demanding schedules. His Invictus Games project supporting wounded veterans became a particular passion, but this increased commitment to royal duty came with a cost. Harry was pouring his energy into an institution that would never value him as much as it valued his brother. The harder he worked, the more apparent it became that he was building someone else's legacy, rather than his own. This realization, though not yet fully formed, began to create a restlessness that would eventually drive him away from royal life entirely. The 14th decision that widened the gap between them was William's choice to prioritize his family life over some royal duties after the birth of his children. This was a reasonable and healthy choice, but it meant that Harry was expected to take on even more engagements to cover for his brother's reduced schedule. Harry willingly stepped up, but the arrangement reinforced the pattern that had defined their entire lives. William's needs and choices came first, and Harry was expected to accommodate them. The 15th crucial decision was made when Harry began seriously dating Meghan Markle. Unlike his previous relationships, this one felt different from the beginning. Meghan was older, established in her own career, and American. She brought a different perspective to royal life and wasn't intimidated by the institution in the way previous royal girlfriends had been. Harry's choice to pursue this relationship seriously, despite knowing it would be challenging for the palace to manage, marked a turning point in his life. For the first time, he was prioritizing his personal happiness over institutional convenience. This decision would prove to be the catalyst for all the conflicts that followed. The relationship between William and Harry at this point was still strong in many ways, but the foundation had been weakened by years of different treatment, different expectations, and different paths. Harry's growing relationship with Meghan would test that foundation in ways that would ultimately prove too much for it to bear. The stage was set for the more dramatic conflicts that would define their adult relationship and ultimately drive them apart permanently. These early decisions, made over nearly 20 years, created a dynamic where William saw himself as the responsible heir who needed to put duty first, while Harry increasingly saw himself as someone whose authentic self was incompatible with royal expectations. Neither brother was wrong in their self-perception, but their different conclusions about what it meant to be royal would eventually make their relationship unsustainable. The 16th decision that would fundamentally alter the relationship between Prince William and Prince Harry came when Harry chose to defend Meghan Markle against what he saw as unfair media coverage. Unlike previous royal girlfriends who had endured press attention in silence, Meghan faced a level of scrutiny that Harry found unacceptable. His decision to speak out publicly about the treatment of his girlfriend marked a dramatic departure from royal protocol and created the first serious rift with his brother. William, who had learned to navigate media attention through careful management and strategic silence, was alarmed by Harry's approach. He understood the brutal nature of press coverage, having watched his own wife endure similar treatment, but he believed the proper response was to work within the system rather than challenge it directly. When Harry released a statement condemning the media's treatment of Meghan, William felt his brother was being naive and potentially damaging to the monarchy's relationship with the press. This fundamental disagreement about how to handle media pressure revealed deeper differences in their worldviews. William saw the press as a necessary evil that had to be managed carefully through official channels. Harry saw it as an institution that had contributed to his mother's death and was now targeting the woman he loved. The emotional weight of this disagreement, connected as it was to their shared trauma over Diana's death, made rational discussion nearly impossible. The 17th decision that drove them apart was William's choice to urge Harry to slow down his relationship with Meghan. Acting from what he believed was brotherly concern, William suggested that Harry was moving too fast and should take more time to be certain about his feelings. This advice, while well-intentioned, was deeply hurtful to Harry, who interpreted it as his brother failing to support his happiness and possibly reflecting prejudice against Meghan's American nationality and mixed-race heritage. Harry's reaction to William's advice was explosive. He felt that his brother, who had taken years to propose to Catherine after a long, careful courtship, was applying a double standard. More painfully, he felt that William was treating Meghan as somehow unworthy of quick acceptance into the family. The conversation, held privately at Kensington Palace, escalated into the first serious argument the brothers had experienced since childhood. William was shocked by the intensity of Harry's reaction. From his perspective, he was offering the same careful consideration he would give to any major life decision. He genuinely wanted Harry to be happy, but believed that rushing into marriage would create complications for both Harry personally and the royal family institutionally. His inability to understand why his advice was so offensive to Harry revealed how differently they had come to view the balance between personal desires and royal obligations. The 18th crucial decision was made during the planning of Harry and Meghan's wedding. While publicly the royal family presented a united front of support, privately there were significant tensions about how the wedding should be handled. Meghan, with Harry's support, wanted elements that reflected her American background, her acting career, and her personal style. Some senior royals, including William, worried that too much deviation from traditional royal wedding protocols would send the wrong message about the monarchy's values. These disagreements weren't about the major elements of the wedding, which proceeded with full royal pageantry at Windsor Castle. Instead, they focused on smaller details that took on outsized symbolic importance. Meghan's choice to wear a veil without the traditional royal family tiara caused private concern. Her decision to have her mother as her only family representative, due to her father's last-minute withdrawal, created protocol challenges that made some family members uncomfortable. William found himself in the difficult position of trying to balance his loyalty to his brother with his growing responsibilities as a senior royal. He wanted Harry's wedding to be successful and joyful, but he also felt pressure to ensure that it maintained appropriate dignity and tradition. This tension made him seem less enthusiastic about the wedding than Harry hoped, creating hurt feelings that lingered long after the ceremony. The 19th decision that damaged their relationship came in the months following Harry and Meghan's wedding, when it became clear that Meghan was struggling with royal life in ways that surprised everyone. Despite her successful acting career and apparent confidence, she found the restrictions and scrutiny of royal life overwhelming. Her distress was genuine and significant, but the family's response to it revealed deep divisions about how to handle such difficulties. Harry believed that Meghan needed more support, protection, and understanding from the royal family and its staff. He felt that the institution should adapt to accommodate his wife's needs and concerns, particularly given her outsider status and the racist undertones of some media coverage. His frustration with what he saw as insufficient support for Meghan created tension with everyone around him, but especially with William. William, while sympathetic to Meghan's struggles, believed that royal life required adaptation from those who joined it, not the other way around. He had watched Catherine make this adjustment successfully, with patience and determination. From his perspective, Meghan needed to find ways to work within the existing system rather than expecting the system to change for her. This fundamental disagreement about adaptation versus accommodation became a source of ongoing conflict. The palace staff found themselves caught in the middle of these different philosophies. Some were genuinely trying to help Meghan adjust, while others seemed resistant to changing established procedures. Harry interpreted any resistance as prejudice or incompetence, while William saw it as maintaining important traditions and standards. Their different interpretations of the same events made it impossible for them to present a united front. The 20th decision that would ultimately end their close relationship was Harry's choice to begin seriously considering leaving royal life entirely. This consideration wasn't sudden. It grew from his frustration with media coverage, his wife's unhappiness, and his long-standing ambivalence about his role within the monarchy. But when he began discussing this possibility with Meghan, and they started making preliminary plans for a different kind of life, it represented a fundamental rejection of everything William believed about royal duty. William was devastated when he learned that Harry was seriously considering stepping away from royal responsibilities. For someone who had spent his entire life preparing to serve the monarchy, the idea that his brother would voluntarily abandon his duties was almost incomprehensible. He felt that Harry was betraying not just the family, but their mother's legacy and the promises they had made to support each other throughout their lives. Harry's perspective was entirely different. He felt that staying in royal life was slowly destroying his mental health and his marriage. He believed that he could honor his mother's memory better by living authentically and using his platform independently, rather than being constrained by royal protocols that seemed outdated and harmful. His decision to prioritize his family's well-being over institutional loyalty felt like the right choice, even if it was painful. The conversations between the brothers during this period were intense and emotional. William pleaded with Harry to reconsider, offering various compromises and accommodations that might make royal life more bearable. He suggested that Harry take a sabbatical, reduce his official duties, or find ways to pursue his interests within the royal framework. But Harry had moved beyond the point where small adjustments felt sufficient. The 21st decision that sealed their estrangement was Harry's choice to proceed with his departure plans without giving William advance notice of the public announcement. When Harry and Meghan released their statement about stepping back from royal duties, William learned about it at the same time as the general public. This breach of protocol and family courtesy felt like a personal betrayal that went beyond their disagreements about royal life. William had expected that any major decision about Harry's future would be discussed with the family before being announced publicly. The fact that Harry chose to present his decision as a fait accompli suggested a level of distrust and disrespect that William found unforgivable. From his perspective, Harry had not only abandoned his duties, but had done so in a way that embarrassed the family and damaged the monarchy's reputation. Harry's decision to announce his intentions publicly before finalizing them with the family was strategic rather than spiteful. He and Meghan had learned that private discussions with palace officials often resulted in delays, leaked information, and eventually no meaningful change. By making their intentions public, they hoped to force a quicker resolution and prevent the palace from controlling the narrative about their departure. The immediate aftermath of this announcement was chaotic and painful for everyone involved. The Queen called for urgent family meetings to discuss how to handle Harry and Meghan's departure. The media went into overdrive speculating about the reasons behind the decision, and the relationship between the brothers, already strained, reached a breaking point from which it has never recovered. William felt that Harry had put his personal desires ahead of his family obligations in a way that was fundamentally selfish. He believed that royal duty required sacrifice, and that Harry was unwilling to make the sacrifices that their positions demanded. The fact that Harry's departure would increase William's own workload and responsibilities, while also potentially damaging the monarchy's reputation, felt like a personal abandonment. Harry felt that William's reaction proved his point about the institution's inability to prioritize individual well-being over institutional needs. He believed that a loving brother should have supported his decision to choose happiness and mental health over duty and tradition. William's focus on the damage to the monarchy, rather than on Harry's personal struggles, felt like evidence that his brother had been completely absorbed by the institution they served. The final conversations between the brothers before Harry's departure to North America were brief, formal, and heartbreaking. They spoke past each other rather than to each other, each convinced that the other had betrayed fundamental values they had once shared. William spoke about duty, tradition, and loyalty to the crown. Harry spoke about authenticity, mental health, and loyalty to his family. The 22nd decision that made their reconciliation nearly impossible was the series of choices both brothers made about how to communicate with each other after Harry's departure. William chose to maintain strict boundaries, communicating only through official channels, and refusing to engage in the public discussion about Harry's reasons for leaving. Harry chose to be increasingly open about his criticisms of royal life, sharing details about family conflicts and institutional problems in interviews and his memoir. Each approach reinforced the other's worst assumptions. William's silence and formality confirmed Harry's belief that his brother cared more about protecting the institution than maintaining their relationship. Harry's public criticism confirmed William's belief that his brother was willing to damage the family and the monarchy to justify his personal choices. The pain of this estrangement was compounded by the fact that both brothers genuinely believed they were acting in accordance with their mother's values. William believed that Diana would have wanted them to serve the monarchy with dignity and support each other within their roles. Harry believed that Diana would have wanted them to prioritize their mental health and authentic happiness over institutional expectations. The tragedy of their broken relationship lies not in any single dramatic betrayal, but in the accumulation of different choices, different pressures, and different interpretations of the same events. Each brother made decisions that seemed reasonable from his own perspective, but those decisions slowly built a wall between them that became impossible to scale. Their story reveals how even the strongest bonds can be broken when personal growth takes two people in fundamentally different directions, especially when those directions are shaped by institutional pressures that neither person chose, but both must navigate. The love between them never disappeared, but it became buried under layers of hurt, misunderstanding, and incompatible visions of what their lives should be. The 23rd decision that transformed Prince William and Prince Harry's relationship from strained to seemingly irreparable came during the immediate aftermath of their grandfather Prince Philip's death in April 2021. Both brothers returned to England for the funeral, providing what many hoped would be an opportunity for reconciliation. However, their choices about how to interact during this emotionally charged time revealed just how deep their rift had become. William made the decision to maintain strict formality with Harry throughout the funeral proceedings. While cameras captured them walking together behind Philip's coffin, their private interactions were minimal and carefully managed by palace protocol. William believed that maintaining dignity and focusing on honoring their grandfather was more important than addressing their personal conflicts during such a public and solemn occasion. Harry, meanwhile, hoped that their shared grief might provide an opening for genuine communication. He had flown from California specifically for the funeral, leaving behind a pregnant Meghan who was advised not to travel. His decision to attend despite their strained relationship represented an attempt to show that family still mattered to him, even amid their conflicts. The brief conversations they had after the funeral service were polite but distant. William later described feeling that Harry had already moved so far away from the family, both physically and emotionally, that meaningful communication had become impossible. Harry felt that William's coldness during such an emotional time proved that his brother had chosen institutional loyalty over family love. The 24th crucial decision was William's choice to maintain complete silence about Harry's allegations in his March 2021 interview with Oprah Winfrey. When Harry and Meghan made serious accusations about racism within the royal family and lack of support for Meghan's mental health struggles, William could have responded with either denials or acknowledgments. Instead, he chose to say only that the royal family was very much not a racist family, and that he hadn't spoken to Harry but would do so. This measured response reflected William's belief that royal dignity required rising above public accusations rather than engaging in detailed rebuttals. He felt that responding to specific claims would only fuel more media speculation and potentially reveal private family matters that should remain confidential. His approach was consistent with traditional royal handling of personal attacks, but it left many questions unanswered and created more distance between the brothers. Harry interpreted William's minimal response as confirmation that the family was more interested in protecting their reputation than in addressing legitimate concerns about how Meghan had been treated. He had hoped that his public revelations might force meaningful conversations about racism and mental health support within the institution. Instead, he felt his concerns were being dismissed through royal silence. The 25th decision that deepened their estrangement was Harry's choice to include detailed criticisms of William in his memoir Spare, published in January 2023. In the book, Harry revealed private conversations, described physical altercations with his brother, and shared intimate family moments that had previously been kept confidential. This decision to monetize their family conflicts through book sales and media interviews felt like a fundamental betrayal to William. William was particularly hurt by Harry's decision to reveal details about their last private conversation, where William had allegedly told Harry that he wanted him to be happy but couldn't understand his choices. By making this conversation public, Harry had violated what William considered the basic trust that should exist between family members. The fact that Harry was profiting from these revelations made them feel even more like betrayals. Harry's perspective on sharing these details was that the royal family had already chosen to make their private conflicts public through strategic leaks to friendly journalists. He felt he was simply telling his side of a story that was already being told in ways that made him look unreasonable or ungrateful. His decision to be completely candid about their relationship was motivated by a desire to set the record straight, even if it caused further damage. The 26th decision that made reconciliation more difficult was William's choice to completely cut off private communication with Harry after the memoir's publication. Previously, they had maintained sporadic text message exchanges and occasional brief phone calls, usually arranged through their private secretaries. After reading Harry's detailed account of their private moments and conflicts, William decided that continuing any form of personal communication would be unwise. This decision reflected William's conclusion that Harry was no longer trustworthy with private family information. If casual conversations could end up in published memoirs, then the safest approach was to have no casual conversations at all. William began treating Harry more like a hostile journalist than a brother, sharing nothing that he wouldn't want to see in print. Harry was devastated by this complete communication shutdown. While he had expected anger about the memoir, he hadn't anticipated that William would cut him off entirely. The silence from his brother confirmed Harry's belief that the institution had completely consumed William's ability to prioritize family relationships over royal obligations. The 27th crucial decision was made by both brothers regarding their father's coronation in May 2023. Harry chose to attend the ceremony but to leave immediately afterward, declining to participate in any of the associated celebrations or family gatherings. William chose to focus entirely on supporting their father during this historic moment, refusing to allow Harry's presence to create any distractions from the solemnity of the occasion. Their interaction at the coronation was minimal and formal. They sat in different sections of Westminster Abbey and exchanged no visible communication during the service. Harry's decision to arrive alone, without Meghan or their children, and to leave within hours of the ceremony's conclusion, sent a clear message that he saw his attendance as a duty rather than a celebration. William's choice to ignore Harry's presence entirely during the coronation reflected his belief that family harmony shouldn't be performed for public consumption when it didn't genuinely exist. He felt that pretending to have reconciled for the cameras would be dishonest and potentially damaging if their ongoing conflicts became public again later. The 28th decision that eliminated hope for near-term reconciliation was Harry's choice to pursue legal action against British tabloid newspapers, which inevitably involved criticizing the royal family's historical relationship with the media. Harry's lawsuits revealed details about how the palace had historically cooperated with certain newspapers in exchange for favorable coverage, including potentially sharing information about Harry himself. William felt that Harry's legal strategy was deliberately damaging to the monarchy's reputation and relationships with media organizations that the royal family needed to work with. The fact that Harry was using court proceedings to air grievances about family dynamics felt like another betrayal, especially since some of the information being revealed had been shared with Harry in confidence. Harry believed that his legal pursuit of phone hacking and privacy violations was separate from his family relationships, and that William should support his right to seek justice. He felt that his brother's concern for the monarchy's media relationships was more evidence of how institutional priorities had replaced normal human loyalties in William's thinking. The 29th decision that made their relationship toxic rather than merely distant was William's reported influence on other family members' interactions with Harry. Several royal relatives, who had previously maintained independent relationships with Harry, began declining to meet with him during his brief visits to London. Harry interpreted this as William using his influence as heir to the throne to isolate him from the rest of the family. William's perspective was that family members were making their own choices about whether to engage with someone who had repeatedly violated family privacy and criticized the institution they all served. He didn't need to pressure anyone to avoid Harry. They were reaching their own conclusions about the wisdom of maintaining close relationships with him. This isolation felt particularly cruel to Harry because it affected his relationships with extended family members who had previously been close to him, including some who had expressed private sympathy for his struggles with royal life. The message seemed to be that maintaining a relationship with Harry required choosing sides, and most family members were choosing William's side. The 30th and most damaging decision was made by both brothers in how they chose to handle their disagreements about their mother's legacy. Both William and Harry believe they are honoring Princess Diana's memory through their actions, but their different interpretations of what she would have wanted have made their conflicts feel more like betrayals of sacred trust. William believes Diana would have wanted both sons to serve the monarchy with dignity and to support each other within their royal roles. He sees Harry's departure and public criticisms as betrayals of their mother's hopes for them. His decision to focus on mental health advocacy and homelessness causes Diana championed feels like carrying on her work in the appropriate way. Harry believes Diana would have prioritized her son's happiness and authenticity over royal obligations. He sees William's inability to support his choice to leave royal life as evidence that his brother has been corrupted by the same institutional thinking that Diana sometimes fought against. His decision to speak publicly about mental health and to live independently feels like honoring his mother's courage and authenticity. The 31st decision that made their estrangement feel permanent was their mutual choice to stop trying to find middle ground. Both brothers reached the conclusion that their fundamental differences about duty, family, and authenticity were irreconcilable. Rather than continuing to hurt each other through failed attempts at communication, they decided that distance and silence were less painful options. William chose to focus entirely on his preparation for kingship and his immediate family, accepting that his relationship with Harry was a casualty of circumstances beyond his control. He stopped hoping for reconciliation and started building his future plans around the reality that Harry would not be part of his support system as king. Harry chose to focus on building his new life in California and using his platform to advocate for causes he believed in, accepting that his royal family relationships were too damaged to repair. He stopped hoping that his family would understand his choices and started building his identity completely independent of their approval. The 32nd decision that sealed their separation was their mutual choice to communicate about each other only through intermediaries or public statements. When significant events occurred in either of their lives, they learned about them through news reports rather than direct communication. This formalization of their estrangement made it clear that they had moved from being brothers who were temporarily angry to being public figures who happened to share parents. The tragedy of these final decisions is that both brothers made choices that protected them from further hurt, but also eliminated any possibility of rebuilding their relationship. Their mutual decision to stop trying to understand each other's perspectives ended the pain of repeated disappointments, but also ended any hope that they might eventually find their way back to each other. The accumulation of these decisions, made over more than 2 decades, created a chasm that may be impossible to bridge. Each choice seemed reasonable in isolation, but together they built a wall of hurt, misunderstanding, and incompatible values that has transformed 2 loving brothers into virtual strangers. The 33rd decision that transformed the relationship between Prince William and Prince Harry from a family conflict into a permanent institutional divide was William's choice to begin planning his future reign without any role for his brother. This wasn't a decision made in anger, but rather a practical acknowledgement that Harry had chosen a path that made him unavailable for royal duties. William began restructuring his vision of the monarchy to function without the traditional support of the spare heir. This planning process required William to fundamentally reimagine how the royal family would operate in the future. Traditionally, the spare had served as backup support for the monarch, taking on duties when the heir was unavailable, and providing a safety net for the continuation of the line of succession. William's decision to plan around Harry's absence meant developing new systems and relationships that didn't depend on brotherly cooperation. The practical implications of this decision were enormous. William began cultivating closer relationships with his cousins, particularly Princess Anne's children and the Duke of Gloucester's family, to fill the supportive roles that Harry might have played. He also began preparing his own children for more prominent roles earlier than might have been traditional, recognizing that they would need to contribute to royal duties without Uncle Harry's assistance. Harry, observing these changes from California, felt a complex mixture of relief and grief. Part of him was glad that William was no longer expecting him to return to royal duties, as it validated his decision to leave. But another part of him mourned the finality of being written out of his brother's future entirely. The childhood promise that they would always support each other had been officially abandoned. The 34th crucial decision was Harry's choice to establish completely independent charitable and business ventures that sometimes competed with or contradicted royal family initiatives. His Archewell Foundation, media production company, and various advocacy projects operated without any coordination with traditional royal charities. This independence was exactly what Harry had sought, but it created situations where the brothers' public work seemed to be in competition rather than collaboration. When both brothers launched mental health initiatives around the same time, the media inevitably compared their approaches and effectiveness. William's work through the Royal Foundation followed traditional models of royal patronage, working within established systems to create change. Harry's work through Archewell took more innovative approaches, partnering with entertainment companies and technology firms to reach younger audiences. These parallel efforts might have been complementary if the brothers had been communicating, but their estrangement turned them into competing narratives about the best way to create social impact. Supporters of each brother began treating these initiatives as evidence of whose approach was superior, further politicizing their family conflict. The 35th decision that deepened the permanent nature of their separation was William's choice to refuse all requests for private meetings when Harry visited England for significant events. Even during their grandmother Queen Elizabeth's death and funeral in September 2022, William maintained strict boundaries about personal interaction with his brother. Harry had hoped that their shared grief over losing the Queen might provide an opportunity for some healing. He made several attempts to arrange private conversations with William during his brief visits to London, but William consistently declined these overtures. From William's perspective, previous attempts at private communication had been betrayed when details appeared in Harry's public statements, making trust impossible. This refusal to engage privately, even during family crises, demonstrated how completely their relationship had broken down. In most family feuds, major life events like deaths and births create opportunities for reconciliation. But William's decision to treat even these occasions as requiring only formal public interaction made clear that he saw no possibility for rebuilding their personal relationship. Harry felt this rejection most acutely during the period surrounding their grandmother's death. He was in London when she died, but learned of her passing through news reports rather than family communication. His attempts to coordinate travel to Scotland to be with the family were met with logistical obstacles and communication delays that felt intentionally exclusionary. The 36th decision that eliminated hope for reconciliation in the medium term was Harry's choice to continue making public statements that criticized not just the institution of monarchy, but specifically William's approach to royal life. In interviews and his memoir, Harry suggested that William had been captured by the system and had lost sight of their mother's values in his pursuit of becoming a successful king. These criticisms hit William particularly hard because they attacked not just his choices, but his character and motivations. Harry's suggestion that William had somehow betrayed their mother's legacy felt like the cruelest possible attack, given how much both brothers' identities were built around honoring Diana's memory. William's friends and advisors encouraged him to respond publicly to these character attacks, but he chose to maintain his silence, believing that dignified non-engagement was more appropriate for someone in his position. However, his private anger about these accusations was significant and lasting, making any future reconciliation more difficult. Harry's perspective was that he was trying to save his brother from an institution that was damaging to everyone who served it. His criticisms were meant as interventions rather than attacks, attempts to show William that there were alternatives to complete institutional compliance. But his approach had the opposite effect, pushing William further into defensive loyalty to the monarchy. The 37th crucial decision was made by both brothers regarding their children's relationships with each other. William chose not to facilitate any connection between his children and their California cousins, while Harry chose not to push for relationships that clearly weren't welcome. This decision effectively ended the family connection for the next generation. William's children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, have grown up essentially unaware of their American cousins, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. The cousins who might have been playmates and lifelong friends have instead become strangers separated by an ocean and their father's conflicts. This separation of the children represents perhaps the most lasting consequence of the brothers' estrangement. While William and Harry might theoretically reconcile at some point in the future, their children are developing entirely separate identities and loyalties that will be difficult to bridge later. Harry has expressed particular sadness about his children growing up without relationships with their grandfather, King Charles, and Uncle William. He had hoped that becoming a father himself might create common ground for reconciliation, but instead found that his children were treated as casualties of his choices rather than as innocent family members deserving of love and connection. The 38th decision that made their conflict feel generational rather than temporary was William's choice to begin actively discouraging other family members from maintaining independent relationships with Harry. Using his position as heir to the throne, William made it clear that he viewed continued engagement with Harry as potentially problematic for family unity. This wasn't done through direct orders or ultimatums, but through the subtle influence that comes with being the future king. Family members understood that their relationships with Harry were being noted and potentially judged by the person who would someday be the head of their family. Most chose to prioritize their relationships with William over their relationships with Harry. The result was that Harry found himself increasingly isolated from cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends who had previously been important parts of his support system. Even relatives who sympathized with his struggles felt unable to maintain close relationships with him without risking their standing with the future king. Harry experienced this isolation as a form of emotional abuse, a systematic campaign to punish him for his choices by cutting him off from all family connections. William saw it as natural consequences of Harry's decisions to publicly attack the family and institution that everyone else was committed to serving. The 39th decision that transformed their relationship from personal conflict to historical antagonism was their mutual choice to allow their story to be told primarily through hostile media narratives and competing biographies. Rather than maintaining control over their own story, both brothers allowed others to define their conflict in ways that served various political and commercial interests. Books, documentaries, and news articles about their relationship consistently portrayed one brother as hero and the other as villain, depending on the author's perspective and target audience. These narratives became so entrenched in popular culture that the actual complexity of their situation was lost in simplified stories about duty versus freedom, tradition versus modernity, or institutional loyalty versus personal authenticity. William found himself being portrayed as either a responsible future king who put duty first, or as a cold institutional creature who abandoned his brother for the monarchy. Harry found himself being portrayed as either a brave rebel who chose authenticity over obligation, or as a selfish traitor who abandoned his family for fame and money. These competing narratives made any future reconciliation more difficult, because both brothers had been forced into defensive positions about their public images. Any move toward reconciliation would require admitting that the stories told about their conflict had been oversimplified or incorrect, potentially damaging carefully constructed public personas. The 40th and final decision that made their separation permanent was their mutual choice to build completely independent legacies that didn't require or include the other brother. William focused on preparing for kingship while building a modern royal family with Catherine and their children. Harry focused on creating an independent platform for advocacy and entertainment while building a private life in California with Meghan and their children. Both brothers stopped hoping or planning for reconciliation and instead invested all their energy in making their chosen paths successful. William threw himself into royal duties with unprecedented dedication, determined to prove that the monarchy could thrive without Harry's contribution. Harry threw himself into his American ventures with equal determination, building a brand and identity completely separate from his royal heritage. This mutual decision to stop looking backward and focus entirely on their separate futures represented the final abandonment of their childhood bond. They were no longer brothers who had fallen out, but rather successful men who happened to share parents and a complicated history. The tragedy of their story isn't just that they stopped speaking or supporting each other. It's that they each built successful, meaningful lives that would have been enhanced by the other's presence and support. William's reign will likely be successful, but it will lack the warmth and relatability that Harry's natural charisma might have provided. Harry's advocacy work will likely be impactful, but it will lack the institutional weight and resources that royal support might have offered. Their children will grow up in different worlds, with different values and different understanding of what family loyalty means. Prince George will learn that duty must come before personal relationships, while Prince Archie will learn that authenticity must come before institutional expectations. Both lessons have value, but the children will never learn that it might be possible to honor both values simultaneously. The permanent wedge between Prince William and Prince Harry wasn't created by any single dramatic betrayal or unforgivable action. Instead, it was built through 40 separate decisions, each reasonable in isolation, that slowly but inevitably moved them from being inseparable brothers to being permanent strangers. Their story serves as a cautionary tale about how institutional pressures, media attention, and different responses to shared trauma can destroy even the strongest family bonds. It also demonstrates how good people can make reasonable choices that lead to heartbreaking outcomes when those choices are made without sufficient communication, understanding, or compromise. The most tragic aspect of their estrangement is that both brothers are probably right about many of their criticisms of each other. William probably has become too absorbed by institutional thinking at the expense of personal relationships. Harry probably has been too willing to damage the monarchy to protect his own interests, But being right about each other's flaws hasn't helped them find a way to love each other despite those flaws. Their mother, Princess Diana, had hoped that her sons would always protect and support each other. Instead, they have spent the last several years protecting themselves from each other. The promise they made as grieving boys walking behind her coffin has been abandoned in favor of incompatible visions of how to honor her memory. The permanent wedge between them stands as evidence that even royal fairy tales can have tragic endings, and that love alone is not always enough to overcome the forces that drive people apart. Their story will likely be studied for generations as an example of how institutional pressures and personal choices can destroy family bonds that once seemed unbreakable.